Welcome back to the program. So, Vice President J.D. Vance today was on Maria Bartiromo's show, Sunday Morning Futures. And he discussed quite a different amount of things, from redistricting, what they're planning on doing with the census, and of course, accountability for Russiagate. So, let me play you some of it, and we'll discuss it and talk about it here.
We spoke with the governor, with the Speaker of the House there in Indiana, and the Senate President, and the message I delivered is pretty straightforward. We want a unified Republican team. We want to fight together, win together, make big things happen for the American people, and obviously the people of the state of Indiana together. But one of the things that you see in a lot of red states is blue states have really aggressively gerrymandered, such that they've actually made it harder for the majority of the state of Indiana to have their voice heard in their federal elections. Because if California has crazy gerrymanders, Illinois has crazy gerrymanders, New York has crazy gerrymanders, what it does is it actually suppresses the will of the people in states like Indiana. And the other thing that we talked about, and I didn't even realize this, Maria, until a couple of years ago, that for apportioning representatives, you actually count illegal aliens. So even though illegal aliens theoretically are not supposed to vote, we know sometimes they do, you still count illegal aliens for congressional apportionment. So California has way more.
And that is exactly how they have been able to, for well over 40 years, cheat in the elections, grow their numbers in the House and in the Senate, and of course be able to redistrict, because they can then say, well, look, we have all these Hispanics, or we have all these African Americans, or we have all these Chinese or Muslims, or whatever it may be, and they say, well, look, this is what's more representative of this area, and so let's create a new district, and of course it'll be favorable towards Democrats. The party's over, losers, okay? The party's over. They're taking it seriously, and you watch what happens on the census in the next census, okay? That's what I'm going to say, and he's going to say it too.
More House seats than it should, because they have such a high population of illegal aliens. So they get rewarded for welcoming illegal aliens into their state, giving them federal benefits, actually asking the taxpayers of states like Ohio to subsidize them.
It's easy. Lure them in illegally, give them all the benefits that regular Americans can't get that are legal citizens, and make sure that they vote Democrat for the foreseeable future. What did I used to say all the time? I used to say that these Democrats that were coming in, that were undocumented Democrats coming into the country, they're not going to vote for Republicans. Why would they? They're going to dance with the people who brought them to the party. I've been saying that since at least 2016, and I haven't been wrong. And so now we're going to change it all. I've also said this. If there was a situation where these illegal aliens were overwhelmingly voting for Republicans, Democrats would be at the border with loaded guns, okay? Making sure that they couldn't come in during the times when they left the border wide open. Because they knew, bring these people in, give them all the benefits in the world, and they'll be nice, good stewards for the Democratic Party.
And then those same taxpayers in Ohio and Indiana and elsewhere, they have fewer congressional representatives because of what California has allowed to happen. That's ridiculously unfair, and the only real way to fight back against it is for us to redistrict in some ways as aggressively as these hard blue states have done.
Well, that's an important point, and that is why President Trump said that he wants more work or new work on a new census.
Yes.
How does that change the GOP makeup and the electoral votes?
Yeah, so another crazy thing that I had no idea about, but everybody, even Democrats actually admit this, that the census in 2020 had a major statistical error. And what that meant is that you actually undercounted a few states that are Republican, like Florida and Ohio. You overcounted some blue states. And so what I understand, if you actually did the census anew right now, you would have 10 additional Republican seats and 9 fewer Democrat seats. And really what we're living with, Maria, is the consequence of 40 years of institutional control of the Democratic Party. These guys have fought very dirty for a very long time, and they haven't just won elections and enacted laws that we may not agree with. They have tried to rig the game for Democrats and against Republicans. And thankfully, under President Trump's leadership, you finally see some spine. You finally see some backbone in the Republican Party to fight back against these very aggressive Democratic dirty tricks. But the only way for us to do it is to actually go and do the hard work to reset the scales a little bit. What we want to do is redo the census, but importantly, we want to redistrict some of these red states, and we want to make the congressional apportionment fair in this country. Again, you can't.
And I'll tell you right now, the administration is much more conservative than Congress, okay? Without a doubt. They want to get things done. They're running into a Congress that is weak and that is globalist and is establishment, the majority of, right? So you're going to have to use the bully pulpit from the White House in order to facilitate these Republicans getting on board and passing what needs to be a brand new census for not counting illegal aliens. Now, how do you do that? Well, I think you can withdraw and hold funds for the re-election campaigns. You can certainly not endorse certain candidates that are not on board with changing the census and eliminating the illegal alien voters and counting them. And of course, these states, they're going to have to do what they need to do to gain more of these seats by redistricting. And so there's going to be a lot of pressure on these state legislatures and things like that. We can get them to do what we need and bend to our will or the administration's will by withholding this.
Cannot do it unless Republicans actually take some very decisive action in the months to come. We think they will, and we're obviously supporting them every step of the way.
But do you worry that as Republicans do that, the Democrat blue states are going to do the same thing, and then you'll have redistricting in California, New Jersey, and so on?
You know, Marie, there's just not a whole lot of juice left out of that lemon. The Democrats have already gone as far as they possibly can. Let me give you a crazy statistic. So I believe that it's in New Jersey, Illinois, New York, California, and there's one other Democrat state where you take those 5 states, you have a large number of Democrat representatives. But here's the crazy statistic. President Trump won 43% of those 5 states, and Democrats have something like 85% of the representatives out of those states. You cannot gerrymander these far left states anymore, and that's the whole point. We have unilaterally disarmed in the Republican Party. We have said to the Democrats, if you want to rig the game in your favor in blue states, go ahead. We're going to do nothing to fight back against it. That's crazy. It makes it harder for us to pass our agenda. It makes it harder for us to win elections. And most importantly, it gives Democrats this ability to run roughshod over the country without any pushback from the American people. The democratic system in this country is broken because who you vote for doesn't necessarily get reflected in who your representatives are. We're just trying to rebalance the scales and, frankly, push back against a very unfair system created by the Democrats.
You know, what's interesting about that last thing is it actually reminds me a lot of this, of preserving liberty, because I talk about in chapter 3 balancing the electorate. I also talk about the different counties, and I talk about the fact that we call ourselves, with a straight face, a representative government of, for, and by the people. Yet 95% of the American people have virtually no say in who their elected officials are. Why? Well, because of the gerrymandering, because of the redistricting, because of counting the illegal aliens. And what it does is it basically eliminates the power structure in rural America, in suburban America, in what they like to call flyover country, right? They like to laugh at and call flyover country. And so what I talk about in Balancing the Electorate in Chapter 3 is how to give rural America, sparsely populated America, suburban America, some of these other areas that are really not counted and honestly, quite frankly, don't even have a vote anymore because the big blue cities drown it all out. And that's how a state votes, unfortunately. Well, what if we can take that power structure away and give it to those areas in the country where they now have the same amount of equal power as the big blue cities? And so what he's talking about here is that 85% representation, but they won 43% of the vote. But yet Democrats have 85% of representation in most of these blue states. And quite frankly, in some states like Massachusetts, zero. There is no Republican representation in a state like that. Or even in Vermont, which is basically a completely blue state, and Rhode Island and all the rest of them. So to think that President Trump won over 40% of the vote in deep blue states, but yet the proportion through the redistricting strategy does not reflect that 43%. It's pretty sad, but it should be coming to an end. So I wanted to point that out. And then there was this right here. We've heard from a lot of people that indictments should be coming. Tulsi Gabbard has said indictments should be coming. Kash Patel, Pam Bond. I mean, all these people, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. You hear it on television. You hear it from different people. Mike Davis was talking about it. People that were on Bannon's show have been talking about it. A lot of people have been saying that indictments are coming. Well, it's kind of nice to hear that coming from the Vice President of the United States as well.
Well, we're still waiting for accountability on the whole Russia collusion made-up story.
Yes.
Now that DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, has released all of those classified documents, we're actually seeing who was behind all of this. Do you want to see indictments?
I absolutely want to see indictments, Maria. Look, of course, you've got to have the law follow the facts here. You don't just indict people to indict people. You indict people because they broke the law. But if you look at what Tulsi and Kash Patel have revealed in the last couple of weeks, I don't know how anybody can look at that and say that there wasn't aggressive violations of the law. What they basically did is they defrauded the American people in order to take Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign talking points and turn them into intelligence by defrauding the American people, defrauding the intelligence agencies, lying about what the intel said. They would take something that supported a Hillary Clinton campaign talking point, and they would overemphasize it and exaggerate it. They took anything that actually contradicted that narrative and they buried it deep. And through that, they actually laundered Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign talking points through the American intelligence services. That's a violation of the people's trust. That's a violation of what our intelligence services should be doing. And I absolutely think they broke the law. And you're going to see a lot of people get indicted for that. Here's the thing that we should really...
You're going to hear a lot of people get indicted for that. That's out of the Vice President's mouth.
Bother the American people. What do you want our intelligence community to be doing? I want them to be catching bad guys. I want them to be making sure that terrorists aren't going to kill innocent American civilians. I don't want them laundering Hillary Clinton's campaign talking points into the American media and giving them this air of legitimacy. It is sick and it's disgusting. It hurt the intelligence community, it hurt the American people, and it hurt the first Trump administration. We've got to have consequences for it, or we're just going to see the same play repeated again and after again.
So there it is, coming from J.D. Vance, the Vice President, who, by the way, is more than ready to take over in 2028. He's smart, intelligent, articulate, answers questions honestly and upfront. He doesn't sugarcoat things. It seems as though he really knows what's going on. And if he can partner with Marco Rubio as the attack dog, as the Vice President, that's a ticket that can't be beat. As far as I'm concerned, I don't see it getting beat. Okay, so I wanted to cover that. Now, let's also talk about this. So the House Oversight Committee is gathering evidence about Joe Biden's mental decline, right, through the auto pen investigation, of course. But more importantly, they are now looking at what I have suggested from the beginning, which is figure out a way to nullify these preemptive pardons, okay? Preemptive pardons should not even be legal, but sadly they are, according to Alan Dershowitz, who, again, is probably the greatest defense attorney, living today. And he said that, sadly, they are legal, but he also did say, when I text messaged him, that they are challengeable. And they've never been challenged before. So what I was saying is we need to figure out a way, and I said this before, to basically have Joe Biden be mentally incapacitated and ruled as such by 3 to 4 separate doctors. You could have 2 Republican, you could have 2 Democrat doctors, that's fine. But you're going to come to a consensus that he is mentally unfit, number one, and number two, he did not sign these pardons, these preemptive pardons. So you take that, you prove to, through a deposition and through the doctors and everything else, that he's mentally unfit. And if he's proven to be mentally incapacitated, then there's no way that he would have had the mental capacity, you see what I'm saying here, to have issued those pardons. You then take that directly to the Supreme Court. You challenge those preemptive pardons. The Supreme Court does the right thing through the medical, the medical community saying that he is indeed mentally incapacitated. So now the Supreme Court has cover, and they rule that those auto pen pardons are completely nullified. Okay? Now, James Comer is thinking exactly the same way that I suggested months ago. Some of Joe Biden's pardons and executive orders may soon be invalidated. In an interview with Just the News, House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer has said that they are planning to gather evidence. Now, he didn't say how, but again, I would say depositions on Joe Biden would be sufficient, but whatever. On Joe Biden's mental decline that may invalidate official actions while he was in office. It's just that simple. I don't have a legal background. I don't play a lawyer on television, but common sense would tell you that if you do it this way, guess what? This is going to be the way to do it. Now, the other thing that he was talking about today, James Comer, on the Clinton subpoenas. Remember, I told you a couple of days ago that he sent out a whole bunch of these subpoenas. Well, he subpoenaed Bill and Hillary Clinton. And what I found out, which is really interesting, is that in order to get these subpoenas sent out, this was not just Republicans only. This actually was Democrats voting with Republicans, so in a bipartisan manner, which really helps when it comes to court cases, because now they can't say that this was all based on just, people being on the right. No, this is both parties signing off on these subpoenas, which is huge. Now, let me play the audio so you can hear it for yourself.
Committee, Kentucky Congressman James Comer. Mr. Chairman, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, Maria.
I want to first talk about these subpoenas to Hillary and Bill Clinton. When are you expecting them to come in to testify under oath?
We've asked them to come in October. We've given them specific dates. What makes these subpoenas special and historical is that they came as a result of a bipartisan vote. The Democrats made a motion, like we knew they would, to subpoena the Epstein documents, which Republicans support. Scott Perry from Pennsylvania amended that motion to include subpoenas for both Bill and Hillary Clinton, as well as 6 former attorneys generals, and the Democrats voted for it. Now they're scared and trying to say they didn't vote for it, but they did. It's on record, and that helps us in court. If the Clintons try to fight this subpoena, which we presume they will, this subpoena came as a result of a bipartisan vote, which has never happened before in the House Oversight Committee. So we're looking forward to hearing from the Clintons. The American people want to know what went on Epstein Island. We know Clinton went there many times. We just want to ask Bill Clinton what he saw when he was there, and who all was involved.
Well, I mean, look, there's a lot of information to be gained from an interview under oath with Hillary and Bill Clinton, that's for sure. Would you also get into Russia collusion?
Well, we would like to ask about that. I'm sure their lawyers are going to be negotiating the terms. The subpoena was issued a few days before the Russia collusion story really broke. But certainly we're going to ask as many questions as we can ask. This is an opportunity to get the Clintons under oath, which people have been trying to do for a long time. So hopefully we'll be able to do that, and we'll get answers to a lot of questions that the American people have.
So you say that they're going to be fighting this. You think this is going to go through the courts?
I would be shocked if it did not go to the court. But again, one thing that stands out is this bipartisan vote. We've never had that. I've been chairman of the House.
The reason that they put it in October is so that there can be court challenges now, and once they win those challenges, then they will be forced to testify. Okay, now whether they do the Fifth Amendment or whatever, I don't know. I can't say. But remember, there's also the threat of jail, and you could have the Peter Navarro, Steve Bannon treatment for people that pled the Fifth. So let's see.
Oversight Committee for a year and a half, Maria, and I've never lost a subpoena battle. This is the toughest battle that we're going to face is getting the Clintons in here. But again, that bipartisan vote, and I want to thank the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee for voting for that subpoena.
Well, I mean, look, another tough battle that you've got in front of you is getting to the bottom of President Biden's 4 terms, 4 years in office. And what was going on there? I mean, it was all very simple and clear for everyone to see that he was, struggling in terms of his mental capacity and this use of the auto pen. Who was running the country for the last 4 years before President Trump?
Well, it looks like a very small inner circle of no-name unelected bureaucrats. They had a tight reign over Joe Biden. They didn't allow a lot of cabinet secretaries like Pete Buttigieg to have access to Joe Biden. They certainly didn't allow the White House press corps to have access to Joe Biden. When he did come out, he was very scripted. And what we've learned is that even when the American people realized after the Hur report and after the disastrous debate performance against Donald Trump that Joe Biden was in mental decline, his staff, we learned from Anita Dunn this week, made the decision not to give Joe Biden a cognitive test. Even when the American people were demanding a cognitive test, they made the decision, the ones who were running the country, that they were not going to give Joe Biden a cognitive test. And I think that is pretty overwhelming evidence that they feared what the results of that test would be.
Total cover-up, 100%. Some people are talking. Some people are going to make deals. Trust me, okay? Some people are going to make deals. And you are going to get some indictments. Now, how many? I don't know. But I think you're going to get at least 3 to 4 indictments, maybe even more than that. Again, I think they're doing things slow and steady and methodical and meticulous. And I think in the end, we're all going to be satisfied with what they end up doing and who they end up charging. So we'll see what happens. Now, so for the last segment here, 15, that's right, 15 Democrats have been arrested for election fraud in the great state of Texas. What have I always said? Texas is the Alamo, okay? It is the political Alamo. If you can take it, country's over. Simple as that. Hate to say it. The amount of electoral votes that they would gain by winning Texas, it's over. Unless we gerrymandered every single red state now before 2026, that would be the only way the country could be saved, basically, if Texas, God forbid, ever went blue. And so, of course, there are tons of people from California, leftist radicals, that purposely moved to Texas, not because they wanted to get away from Gavin Newsom. They were fine in their communist haven over there. They wanted to create a communist haven in Texas. And they've tried in Houston, they've tried in San Antonio, they've tried in Dallas and Fort Worth and some of those areas. Thankfully, there are still a lot of patriots and conservatives in Texas. So I would say at this point right now, there is no danger in Texas turning blue. But we got to make sure that we are busting people for voter fraud like we just happen to have here. In rural South Texas, prosecutors have brought forward one of the most significant vote harvesting cases in recent history. On May 1st, 2025, a Frio County grand jury indicted 6 people, including multiple public officials, on felony election fraud charges. The indictment secured after a 2-year investigation led by the great Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's office exposed an organized ballot harvesting operation and influenced multiple local races in a heavily heavily Democrat region. Among those charged were Frio County Judge Rochelle Camacho, who faces 3 counts of vote harvesting, former Frio County Elections Administrator Carlos Segura, charged with tampering with physical evidence, Pure Sol City Council members Ramiro Trevino and Rachel Garza, Pure Sol ISD trustee Adrian Ramirez, who is Camacho's sister, and Rosa Rodriguez, identified as alleged ballot harvesters. State investigators say that the scheme targeted elderly residents. See, the left always goes after the most innocent in society and the most vulnerable in society, right? They either go after people that can't defend themselves, like the unborn, or people that are infants or children and babies, or they go after the elderly, people that also can't really defend themselves. Why? Well, because they're deviant and they're sick and they're demonic, and they know that they can't go after anyone else that has a pulse and a brain, because those people are going to fight back. But of course, they're going to go after the people that can't fight back and, of course, take advantage of them because they're all sick. So once again, they went after the elderly residents and those voting by mail. Oh, gee, there's no mail ballot fraud. No, of course not. Whose ballots collected in violation of Texas election law. Under Texas, in 2021, this was again after they stole the 2020 election, Texas was one of the states that came right out and said, we're going to, secure our elections more. So in Texas in 2021 had some election integrity reforms, and it says compensated ballot collection. In other words, if you get paid and get caught for getting paid to deliver ballots, okay, or collect ballots and distribute them, it is a penalty, a felony of up to 10 years in prison, okay? 10 years in prison if you are being paid to distribute ballots around the state of Texas. The arrest did not occur in isolation either. In August of 2024, Paxton's Criminal Investigations Division executed search warrants in Frio, Brexar, and Atascosa counties, seizing evidence connected to what the Attorney General's office described as an illegal ballot harvesting operation or ring. The warrants were the culmination of years of complaints from local residents who claimed political operatives were systematically collecting and manipulating mail-in ballots. Investigators believe that the operation was linked to a political network that benefited multiple Democrat candidates in local races. The investigation expanded in mid-2025. On June 30th, 2025, a second grand jury returned indictments against 9 additional individuals, bringing the total number of defendants to 15. Among the newly charged was former Texas House candidate Cecilia Castellano, a Democrat, as well as former Bexar County Democrat Party Chair Juan Manuel Medina. Other defendants include current and former city officials, school board members, and county commissioners across Frio County. The charges range from vote harvesting to tampering with government records, all tied to the same coordinated ballot collection network. Thank God Ken Paxton is crushing voter fraud in the state of Texas. Because if he didn't, and we're not doing these redistricting things, Texas could eventually turn blue, folks. Don't think that it can't. All they have to do is flood it with illegal aliens, figure out a way to grow more House seats in Texas, and eventually dilute the power of the state, and eventually it becomes a blue state. That's been their goal. It's been their goal for well over 10 years. Gerrymander their way into power. They don't just do it in Texas, they do it all over the country. And it needs to stop. And I think President Trump and this administration are serious about it, and they're going to hopefully get this census done. Because when they do this census and they remove all the illegal alien voters, you are talking 30 to 40 less Democrat House seats, and probably somewhere between 25 and 30 more Republican House seats. We are talking the precipice of being in a permanent majority for the foreseeable future. And all we are doing, by the way, is nothing illegal or unconstitutional. We are just stopping what they have been doing, which has been illegal and, yes, unconstitutional. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Put them down in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one.